Adana sat across from Nigeria's biggest blogger, Hilde Kanu herself. The office overlooked Lagos' bustling streets, but all attention was on the folders Adana had brought. These are bank statements, Adana explained, spreading papers across the desk, showing how Chibuzo used both families' connections for contracts. Classic 419. Hilda examined the documents. This is explosive. But why are you really doing this? Let's just say, Karma doesn't need a visa to operate. Meanwhile, back in Port Harcourt, Chibuzo's phone buzzed with a preview of the upcoming exposé. Emergency room burst into action as Elora was wheeled in, Kenneth running alongside the stretcher. Her blood pressure had skyrocketed after a confrontation with Chibuzo's mother at the market. BP 160-100, a nurse called out. Baby's heartbeat is irregular. Kenneth backed orders, his professional demeanor masking his personal anguish. Get Dr. Mrs. Adebayo here now. Start her on magnesium sulfate. In the waiting room, both Sophia and Mama Okafor sat at opposite ends, drawn by concern despite their anger. Chibuzo was nowhere to be found. The emergency board meeting had been called at midnight. Chibuzo sat at the head of the table, watching his empire crumble in real time. The shares have dropped 40% since the scandal broke, his CFO reported grimly. Chief Adebayo has pulled out of all joint ventures. That's not all, another board member added. The NNPC investigation into contract irregularities. Chibuzo loosened his tie, feeling trapped. On the wall-mounted TV, Hilde Kanu's blog headline scrolled, Port Harcourt oil magnates double life exposed, business fraud and baby mama drama. Adana hosted a small dinner party in her penthouse apartment. Her guests included key society gossips and a few journalists. The view of Port Harcourt skyline provided a dramatic backdrop as she raised her champagne glass. To Karma, she smiled. 3 years I waited. Watching him build his life with other women while my reputation lay in ruins. Her best friend, Zara, touched her arm. But why expose the business dealings? That's going too far. Too far. Adana's eyes flashed. When he dumped me, he told everyone I was a gold digger. That Cross River girls can't be trusted. He destroyed my father's contracts with his company. Now he knows what it feels like. Her phone buzzed, another news alert about Chibuzo's falling stock prices. The rhythmic beeping of medical monitors filled the intensive care unit where Elora lay unconscious. Kenneth hadn't left her side for 12 hours, his medical coat wrinkled, his eyes red from exhaustion. Doctor, a nurse called softly. Her brother is here. With their family lawyer. Emeka Nwachukwu strode in, his expensive suit contrasting with his haggard expression. Behind him, a stern-faced lawyer carried a briefcase. What happened to my sister? Emeka demanded. Preeclampsia, Kenneth explained. The stress triggered a severe spike in blood pressure. We had to perform an emergency procedure to stabilize both mother and child. And where is that bastard who did this to her? As if on cue, Chibuzo appeared at the door, looking disheveled. Before anyone could react, Emeka's fist connected with his jaw. You nearly killed my sister. Security rushed in as Kenneth stepped between them. Not here. This is an ICU. The palace of the traditional ruler of Port Harcourt hosted an emergency meeting. Present were elders from both the Igbo and Yoruba communities, called to prevent the situation from escalating into an intertribal conflict. Chief Adebayo sat with his kinsmen on one side, while the Igbo elders occupied the other. The air was thick with tension and the scent of traditional chalk. This boy has brought shame to both our communities, the traditional ruler began. But we cannot let this destroy decades of peaceful coexistence. Mama Okafor knelt in the traditional way, her wrapper spread around her. Your Highness, I beg, let me speak. Kenneth stared at the resignation letter on his desk. His decision to become personally involved in Elara's case had raised ethical concerns among the hospital board. Dr. Mrs. Adebayo sat across from him, her expression sympathetic. You know you can't be both her doctor and her, whatever you're becoming to her. I know, Kenneth said quietly. That's why I'm stepping down as her physician. But I'm not stepping away from her life. His phone buzzed with a message from Chibuzo, stay away from my woman. Chibuzo faced his remaining board members in the conference room. The once proud oil services company was now fighting for survival. The NNPC has suspended all our contracts, his CFO reported. The banks are calling in their loans. Without Chief Adebayo's influence. To hell with influence. Chibuzo slammed his fist on the table. This is my company. My father built this from nothing. Your father, an elderly board member, spoke up, never mixed business with pleasure. He never played with people's daughters. On the screens behind them, stock tickers showed their shares in free fall. Adana hosted Hilde Konu for a follow-up interview. The Lagos-based blogger asked, recorder running. Adana smiled, sliding a USB drive across the table. Emails. Proving he used both families' political connections to win contracts. The real reason he was playing both girls. This would destroy him completely. Good. Adana sipped her champagne. He destroyed me 3 years ago. Called me a gold digger. Said Cross River girls were only after money. Let's see how he likes being the one whose reputation is ruined. But as she watched the sun set over Port Harcourt, something felt hollow about her victory. The machines monitoring Elara's condition blared in the middle of the night. Kenneth rushed in, still pulling on his white coat, having refused to go home despite no longer being her official doctor. BP dropping, a nurse called out. Baby's heartbeat is irregular. Dr. Mrs. Adebayo took charge. Prepare the awe. We need to perform an emergency C-section. In the waiting room, an unprecedented gathering, Mama Okafor clutching her rosary, Sophia sitting quietly in a corner, Amaka pacing anxiously, and Chibuzo standing alone by the window. The weight of his choices hung heavy in the air. This is all your fault, Amaka spat at Chibuzo. If anything happens to my sister or that baby. Suddenly, Kenneth burst through the doors. We need the family's consent for emergency surgery. Both mother and child are at risk. All eyes turned to Chibuzo, who stood frozen. It was Mama Okafor who stepped forward. Save them both, she commanded, then turned to her son. For once in your life, be the man your father raised you to be. Hilda sat at her desk, reviewing the final draft of the explosive exposé. Adana's revelations had opened a Pandora's box of corporate fraud, cultural manipulation, and political machinations. But as she read through the evidence one last time, something caught her eye. An inconsistency in the dates. A closer look at the bank statements revealed subtle manipulations. Her phone rang, it was her contact at the NNPC. Madam Hilda, we've verified those documents. Some of them are forged. In Port Harcourt, Adana received an unexpected visitor, her former assistant at Chibuzo's company, bearing a guilty conscience and a confession about helping fabricate evidence. The emergency gathering of elders from both communities had turned into an all-night session. The palace grounds were filled with cars bearing license plates from across Nigeria, evidence of how far-reaching the scandal had become. Chief Adebayo stood to address the gathering. This is no longer about two young people and their poor choices. This is about our communities, our traditions, our future relations. An elderly Igbo chief raised his hand. In our tradition, when a child is coming, everything else becomes secondary. But this boy has broken protocols in both cultures. Mama Okafor, who had just returned from the hospital, stepped into the center of the gathering. My son has failed both families, she declared. But that child fighting for life in the hospital, that innocent child is both Igbo and Yoruba. Will we let our pride destroy its future? Kenneth stood watching through the glass as Ilara slept peacefully for the first time in days. The surgery had been successful, she and the baby were both stable. On the other side of the glass, Chibuzo approached. "You love her, don't you?" Chibuzo asked quietly. Kenneth didn't turn. "I loved her in university, when you didn't know she existed. I loved her when she chose you. I loved her when you betrayed her. And yes, I love her now. And what about my child? A child needs a father who's present, who's honest, who puts family before pride." Kenneth finally faced him. "Can you be that man, Chibuzo?" The truth about Adana's manipulated evidence had come to light, but the damage to Chibuzo's reputation wasn't so easily undone. In his office, now stripped of its former grandeur, he faced his remaining board members. "We've lost contracts, yes," he admitted. "But we haven't lost our integrity. Not yet." He laid out a plan for restructuring the company, starting with full transparency and a return to the ethical principles his father had established. But first, he had a personal mission. Opening his desk drawer, he removed 3 velvet boxes. One contained his mother's coral beads, meant for his bride. Another held a traditional Igbo bride price collection. The third contained divorce papers. "It's time to make things right," he whispered to his father's portrait on the wall. Thanks for watching. Stay updated for part 2 of this story, which will drop soon. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Turn on your notification bell so as soon as new videos drop you will be among the first to know. By liking and subscribing you enable us to continue producing more videos. Thank you. Now go ahead and click on our next thriller video.